men now living who will soon pass away. Like the grass in the field and the flowers they spread, or the graves of their comrades, immortal, dead. Tall monuments stand to their memory dear, but they crumble and fall like the leaf when sere. Our nation united forever will stand to those who preserve it, a moment grand. Whenever we gather today 'neath the stars, let's honor our living, now wearing scars, which they brought from the fields of battle and strife while protecting our flag and our nation's life. Let the flowers bear tribute in their simple way, and each one remember Memorial Day. Remember the dead and the living, though few, who fought 'neath the stars in the red, white, and blue. That was an excerpt from a poem by Frederick Emerson, and you'll never guess it, but the title of it was Memorial Day. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jay Burbank, commander of the Cambria American Legion Post 432, and I want to thank you all for joining us today to honor the country's fallen. In May 1868, General John A. Logan, the commander-in-chief of the Union's Veterans Group, issued a decree that May 30th would become a nationwide commemoration day for more than 620,000 soldiers killed in the recently ended Civil War. On Decoration Day, as Logan dubbed it, Americans would lay flowers and decorate the graves of the war dead. Historians believe the date was selected to ensure that flowers across the country would be in full bloom. In 1968, Congress changed the official holiday to the last Monday in May, today. We are honored to have the members of the Cambria Chorus, directed by Randy Schwabe and Jan Kallner at the keyboard. In addition, what a better way for the youth to learn about Memorial Day and the sacrifices of our veterans than to participate in our ceremony. We have youth members from 4-H, Cambria Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Girl Scouts assisting us today. I would like everybody to please rise, and we will begin our program with the raising of the American flag. The symbol of our great country, Kathleen Ashlock, who is the daughter of our very own Jerry McKenna, will sing our national anthem as it is raised. Kathleen?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave peace through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say
Wow, thank you, Kathleen. At this time, we will be posting the flags representing each branch of the armed forces. Family members and members of our local youth group will assist our veterans in raising the flag. Our newest member of the American Legion, Greg Passwater, and Tristan Lehrman will post the Coast Guard flag.
So here's the Coast Guard marching song. We sing on land or sea, through surf and storm and falling gale, our shall our purpose be. Send the promises our guide, our fame, our glory to fight, to save or fight and die. Our Coast Guard, we are for you.
Merchant Marines, Jerry McKenna and Uriah Friedman.
Heave ho, my lads, heave ho. It's a long, long way to go. It's a long, long pull with our hatches full. Braving the wind, braving the sea, finding the treacherous foe. Heave ho, my lads, heave ho. Let the sea roll high or low. We can cross any ocean, sail any river. Give us a good time, we'll deliver. Yeah, the submarines, we're the men of the Merchant Marine.
Air Force, Dave Ehlers and his daughter, Tori Ehlers.
Off we go, into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atta boys, give 'em the gun. Down we dive, starting our flame from under. Off with one hell of a roar. We live in fame, we're down in flame. Hey, nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force.
Navy, Rob Maston and Elise Happel.
Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to college shores, we sail at break of day. Through our last night on shore, drink to the full, until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home.
Marine Corps, Tim Chrisman and Laura Casey.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine.
Army, Alan Fields and his granddaughters, Elizabeth and Emily Reed.
First to fight for the right and to kill the nation's fight, and the Army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the Army goes rolling along. There is high, high, hey, the Army's on its way. Count off the cadence on its roll. For wherever we go, you always know that the Army goes rolling along.
In memory of those MIA and POW, Mel McCullough and Sequoia Friedman. Please join me now. Meadow Mercado will say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. At this time, I would like our chaplain, who is going to have to walk over here right now, Alan Fields, will come over and offer a prayer. Uncover.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, with reverence and love, we pause to pay tribute to our honored and valiant departed comrades. Grant that we may be mindful of their service to God and country and to our comradeship with them in the ranks of the American Legion. Hallow their graves, give courage and comfort to those having suffered the loss of a loved one. Which watch over the graves of our comrades, grant eternal rest and their ashes grace and happiness to their souls, and keep them till the hour of the final revealed at the day when they may be called before the divine commander. May their souls be present and accounted for. May their souls and the souls of all departed comrades rest in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Covered.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. Will everybody please be seated now, and the color guard is dismissed. Memorial Day is a time to reflect, to remember those who have gone before and paid the ultimate price so we might be free. Let us pay tribute to those who answered the call, and may we remember freedom is not free. Today, we are honored to have Greg Sanders, who is a former Cambria resident and past commander of the American Legion, Post 432. Although Greg and his wife Terry moved to Southern California in 2017, he has continued to keep his membership and keep talking to the post. Greg served in the Vietnam War as an infantry officer and psychological operations officer with the Americal Division, part of the 23rd Infantry Division in July. While serving in Vietnam, he was sent to the Phoenix program, the school at Van Thao, South Vietnam, and became the Phoenix program liaison for the Americal Division to the provincial reconnaissance units in two of the provinces in Vietnam in the division's operations. After 3.5 years on active duty, Greg served in the Army Reserves for 9 years. He is currently a serving JAG officer with the California State Guard with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Greg holds bachelor's and master's degrees in history. His recent book, Bait, The Battle of Camp Duck Special Forces Camp, written with co-author Jim McElroy, Leroy, was published by Hellgate Press. The book has been selected by the Association of American Army for inclusion in its Vietnam War series. A second edition of the book is soon to be published by Casemate Press, a highly regarded book publisher, and it should be in bookstores in November. Today, Greg is going to give us some fresh perspectives on the Vietnam War and those American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who fought and died there. I give you Lieutenant Colonel Greg Sanders.
Thank you, Commander Jay Burbank, for your generous introduction. It is good to be back among friends, and especially my American Legion Auxiliary, Sons of the American Legion, and Legion Riders soulmates. And I must say, it's a tad cooler here in Cambria than it is in Indian Wells. But I'll get acclimated. I'm often asked what incident that occurred at the Battle of Cam Duck, which my book is about and which Jay just alluded to, that stands out among all of the other incidents that took place over the 3 days of that battle. Before I get to the serious part of my message, let me respond. The incident that I am going to relate to you points up the dark humor that sometimes attends war, and which all of you veterans out there, I'm sure, can appreciate. What I'm about to relate to you is not in the text of the first edition of the book, but it may well make its way into the second edition. A little bit of background first. Patrick Henry Brady is the most decorated veteran of the Vietnam War. He was a helicopter dust-off pilot, and for those of you not familiar with the term dust-off, it was the universal radio call sign for air ambulances that flew in to evacuate casualties to medical facilities and the dead to the morgue. Flying as a co-pilot or crewman on a dust-off flight was, without a doubt, the most dangerous job in the war. The Red Cross on white background emblazoned on the nose and sides of the dust-off helicopters was used as a target by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army troops. Pat Brady flew 2 tours as a dust-off pilot. For one particularly heroic rescue of wounded soldiers, Brady was awarded the Medal of Honor. For another, he was awarded the nation's second highest award, the Distinguished Service Cross. He was also the recipient of 2 Distinguished Service Medals, 2 Bronze Stars for Valor, a Purple Heart, 6 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 52 Air Medals for Valor. He retired in 1993 as a Major General. During his second tour in Vietnam, Pat Brady was in command of the 54th Medical Detachment that included a fleet of dust-off helicopters. Now, it was Brady's policy that all new pilots assigned to his unit had to first fly a few missions with him as a co-pilot before flying on their own. So during the Cam Duck battle, Brady's co-pilot was Don Sewell, and Don was flying his first mission. When Brady settled the dust-off helicopter onto the ground on their first trip out to pick up wounded, there was a lot of lead flying around. A lot of enemy bullets pointed at the helicopter. Now, while waiting for the wounded to be loaded, Brady, out of the corner of his eye, spotted Don Sewell rocking back and forth in the co-pilot seat rather violently, back and forth, and finally Brady turned to him and said, "Don, what the hell are you doing?" And Don said, "Oh, Major Brady, it's much harder for the enemy to hit a moving target." True story. Now on to more serious matters. The Vietnam War is the least understood war America has ever fought, and for good reason. The history of the United States' early involvement in the war is given short shrift in high school and college history classes, and how the war was fought and why it was fought the way it was fought receives very little attention. Rather, much of the history of the war taught in our schools simply parrots a few tired and erroneous themes that include the theory that the war was essentially a civil war in which we chose sides with the wrong faction. The war for the United States and its allies was not winnable, and the stereotype of the maligned American soldier hooked on drugs, unable to successfully assimilate back into society once out of the military, all woven around a roiling anti-war movement. Lost in all of these false narratives is the truth about the war. Let me spend just a few minutes dispelling one myth that has been perpetuated over the decades since the war ended, and that myth is that the war was not winnable. To do that, allow me to give you a few simple objective facts. American ground forces were first deployed to South Vietnam in 1965 to help stem the momentum that the Viet Cong had gained with substantial aid from the North Vietnamese and its patrons, Communist China and the Soviet Union, over South Vietnam's forces. Now, ironically, the very first engagement for American ground forces in South Vietnam was not against the Viet Cong. That battle pitted the 1st Air Cavalry Division against a battalion of the 1st Air Cavalry Division against an entrenched regiment of regular North Vietnamese Army troops. The North Vietnamese Politburo, which was the ruling committee of the North Vietnamese Communist Party that had control of the country, had made the decision to invade South Vietnam, sending regular North Vietnamese Army troops into combat in an effort to quickly win the war. Once the Viet Cong had gained momentum and was essentially pushing into the more populated areas of the country and had the North Vietnamese military on the run, the North Vietnamese thought, this is our chance, we're going to send regular troops to South Vietnam and we are going to quickly win the war. No matter how one attempts to characterize North Vietnam's involvement in the war, it is inescapable that North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam for the purpose of overthrowing a sovereign nation. As the war dragged on, more and more North Vietnamese regulars filled the ranks of Viet Cong units. So much for the Civil War theory. By 1967, less than 2 years after the introduction of American ground forces into South Vietnam, the so-called tipping point had been reached. The gains that the Viet Cong had made were reversed, and by mid-1967, through combat attrition, North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong losses totaled an average of 15,000 troops a month. And keep that number in mind, 15,000 a month were taken out of the fight. The Viet Cong could only recruit or coerce into its ranks about 3,500 men and women per month, and the ability of the North Vietnamese Army to infiltrate troops into the south was limited to about 7,000 a month. The deficit that the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong faced could not be filled. At that point in the war, the math simply did not work for the communists. One high-ranking Viet Cong defector reported that the communist troop units suffered heavy reverses and casualties, and that the heavy infiltration of North Vietnamese Army troops was just not enough to fill the gaps. It was only a matter of time before North Vietnam could no longer sustain the fight. So it was against this very desperate situation in mid-1967 that the North Vietnamese Politburo was forced to reappraise its strategy. The reappraisal resulted in the plan for the Tet Offensive of 1968. Essentially, the plan had two distinct elements. The first was to simultaneously attack Allied military installations and government offices and compounds around the country to create the illusion that the communist forces were stronger than they actually were, thereby emboldening South Vietnamese civilians to rise up and overthrow the unpopular South Vietnamese regime. The second element was to engage American forces and win one large battlefield victory that would cause the United States to throw in the towel, just as the Viet Minh forces had caused France to end hostilities in 1954, following the French Army's disastrous loss at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. So essentially, the North Vietnamese tried to make history repeat itself. The result of the 1968 Tet Offensive for the communist forces was a complete military disaster. While Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army units engaged in simultaneous attacks around the country, the communists were able to sustain only the Battle of Hue. No uprising of the South Vietnamese populace ever materialized. As for the one large-scale battle, the North Vietnamese conducted a siege at Khe Son, at the Marine combat base there, for 77 days. During that siege, the North Vietnamese Army lost a staggering 10,000 to 15,000 troops. The Tet Offensive losses were so great for the Viet Cong that it ceased to exist as a viable military fighting force. And as for the North Vietnamese Army, it was so decimated it could not sustain a major offensive for 4 more years. So why is it that such a military disaster failed to cause the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese to quit the battlefield and sue for peace? The answer is quite simple, revealing the primary reason many of the myths about the war came to be and persist to this day, particularly the myth that the war was not winnable. On February 27, 1968, as the Khe Son battle raged, CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite, America's grandfather, ended his news report a few minutes early to report on his recent trip to South Vietnam. In today's parlance, Cronkite's report can only be characterized as fake news. Among other things, he reported that, quote, Khe Son could well fall, with a terrible loss in American lives, prestige and morale, and this is a tragedy of our stubbornness there, close quote. And, quote, we are mired in a stalemate, close quote. His report could not have been further from the truth. Regarding Khe Sanh, the battle was one the United States wanted to happen. The North Vietnamese Army units that engaged at Khe Sanh were lured out of their jungle sanctuaries and lulled into believing that the Marine combat base could be overrun. Khe Sanh was planned not so much by the North Vietnamese as by General Westmoreland and the Marines. By significantly upgrading the defenses at the base and employing a new radar bombing technology that facilitated close-in B-52 bombing 24 hours a day, almost 7 days per week, a steel curtain was placed around the base that was impenetrable. With the North Vietnamese units in the open, the constant pounding they took from the air caused their casualties to rise to the breaking point. Civilians in the area reported later that the North Vietnamese bodies were stacked up like so much cordwood. The truth is, Khe Sanh was never in danger of falling. As for the stalemate that Cronkite so confidently declared, the Tet Offensive and the Khe Sanh battle were the death knell of the Viet Cong and, as I said before, seriously crippled the North Vietnamese Army. Unfortunately, Walter Cronkite's preposterous February 27, 1968 editorial caused political repercussions from which President Lyndon Johnson could not recover. With his editorial, the unassailable, grandfatherly television news icon galvanized sentiment against the war and gave credibility to the misreporting of the war that had gone on since the introduction of American ground forces in South Vietnam in 1965. The result was the North Vietnamese were sufficiently emboldened to stay in the fight. Bui Tin, a North Vietnamese Army colonel who was the editor-in-chief of Nam Dan, the official newspaper of the North Vietnamese Communist Party, akin to Pravda in the Soviet Union, wrote years later that senior North Vietnamese officials were stunned at the Cronkite report and the American public's reaction to the Tet Offensive. In every public relations sense, Walter Cronkite and other television and print journalists who had either previously revealed a bias in their reporting of the war or hopped on the Cronkite bandwagon enabled the North Vietnamese to snatch a powerful psychological victory from the jaws of a crushing military defeat. And through the many years, the stalemate theme, reinforced with such loose language as quagmire, stuck, perpetuating the illusion that the Vietnam War was unwinnable when in fact victory was at hand in early 1968. So why did I choose to dwell on the unwinnable war theme? Today is Memorial Day. Many American lives were sacrificed in Vietnam. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, who were all every bit as worthy and noble as their counterparts in America's previous wars, including World War II and Korea. Let's hope that the recent surge of scholarship and books on the Vietnam War that have reassessed America's involvement and put the objective facts about the war in their proper perspective gain traction. Future generations need to know the truth. That is the least we can do for those whose names are etched on the granite slabs of the Vietnam War Memorial. Thank you.
Wow.
At this time, we have come to present the Mel McCullough Merchant of the War, Merchant of the Year. Boy, tell where my head is. Merchant of the Year Award. The plaque acknowledging each year's recipient will hang permanently on the wall in post 432, and an individual plaque will be awarded to the recipient. And I would like to invite Mel McCullough to the award.
We can thank this award that began years ago and was started by Colonel Sanders and has been going on every year since. This year will be the first year that we've ever awarded the plaque and the honor to two people rather than one. And I would like to have Kim and Rob Matson come forward, please, to receive the award. That would be Mayor Matson and the first gentleman, by the way. The plaque reads, American Legion, Cambria Post 432 presents to the 2019 Mel McCullough Merchant of the Year Award to Team Matson, Kim and Rob. And congratulations. And she writes articles about the Legion regularly and all the activities in her column. And Rob is always at the Legion helping out wherever he can. This couple is very deserving of this award this year.
Don't worry about it, Brian. We don't need pictures. I'm crying. I suppose we should say something. I don't know what to say. I know, right? So maybe Rob should talk.
Well, all I can say is that this caught us by such a surprise that I can only just say thank you to everyone. Thank you for your support. Thanks for supporting the Legion and everything that they do here. It's a wonderful group, and I want to see it resurrected and come to a next level. And I plan to be a part of that going forward. So thank you so much. This is a great honor. And thank you, Mel. You're a wonderful person.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, and Mel, and we're just very honored, totally surprised. Mel has always been one of the kindest people to me in the American Legion, and so the fact that this award has his name on it is just even more special. And God bless everyone, and enjoy your Memorial Day. Thank you.
How about that? We pulled it off, Mel. Karina, would you escort Pat Williams up to the podium, please? In tradition, it is tradition to lay flowers in the graves of the fallen veterans. This year, the wreath will be placed on the Cambria Veterans Memorial to my left by a member of the Legion Auxiliary whose veteran husband has passed. At this point, I would like to ask if any other women auxiliary ladies have lost their husbands to please stand. Pat Williams will now place a wreath on the memorial. Thank you, Pat and Karina. This year, 3 Cambria veterans were able to travel back to Washington, D.C. to see their memorials. This year's participants were Bob Huth, John Ellers, and Alan Doctor, and I would like to ask them and all in attendance who have been on honor flight to please stand. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you are a World War II veteran, a Korean veteran, or a Vietnam veteran, or any of the further newer veterans, sign up. Sign up to go to honor flight. You will get a free ride to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. If you want to really have some really good juju, you need to sign up to be a guardian. I and my daughter were guardians, and I came back a changed man. It was really special to see the love and care that the country gave these people as they walked out of the airport to their buses. Contact the Legion if you have any questions about this, please. And to all veterans right now, thank you for your service. We try to honor our fallen veterans not only on Memorial Day in their ceremonies and through honor flight, but also throughout the year. 5 years ago, the American Legion Post 432 joined an effort called Wreaths Across America to remember our fallen U.S. veterans by placing wreaths on all their graves around Christmas time and doing it at the same time, exact same time, as the wreath laying at the Arlington National Cemetery. The community's response to this effort has been phenomenal, and I've received several postcards and letters last Christmas, New Year, of people that were astounded at what it looked like at the cemetery. Last year, we were able to get enough donations to put 500 wreaths on the graves of the veterans. We did it at both the Cambria Cemetery and the Santa Rosa Cemetery on the hill. This year, we have a table set up, so afterwards, if anybody that wants to help this effort, please donate $15 or more to a wreath, and it will be placed on every cemetery up in Cambria, every grave on Cambria cemeteries. This effort will go on through late November, and so if you get a chance, please do that. This year, 11 of our Legion members transitioned to post-everlasting. Adjutant John Ellers and Chaplain Alan Fields, who is the chaplain of the Sons of American Legion, will honor our members who have moved to post-everlasting. John, Alan?
It is the custom of American Legion Post 432 to conduct the transfer to post-everlasting ceremony on Memorial Day for those comrades who have died within the last year. It is my sad duty to report that 11 comrades have been called from our midst and have gone to report to the commander of all. This moment is sacred, with almost visible presence of those who have gone on before. We come to honor the memories of those who offered their lives in service of our country and will now be enrolled in the Great Spirit Army whose footfalls cause no sound. But the memory of mankind, their souls go marching on, sustained by their pride of service in time of war. Because of them, our lives are free. Because of them, our nation lives. Because of them, the world is blessed. May this service deepen our reverence to our departed comrades. The following comrades will now be transferred to post everlasting. Ika Adams.
Not present.
Richard Brownhill.
Not present.
Don Cowles.
Not present.
Edward Fiscalini.
Not present.
Jane Masterson.
Not present.
Reggie Perkins.
Not present.
Hugh Scott.
Not present.
Paul Turner.
Not present.
Alan Watson.
Not present.
Joe Wood.
Not present.
Legionnaires and friends, let us here pledge ourselves anew to united service, to consecrate and sanctify our comradeship by a devotion to mutual helpfulness and the protection of those left behind.
I would like all to stand for the rifle volley and the playing of caps by our Service Officer Sandy Beloy. And salute. Honor Guard, will you please raise the flag to full staff? Present arms. Two. Thank you. And now continue to stand, please, where our chaplain offers us a closing prayer. Alan?
Uncover. Almighty God, who has made us citizens of a great land in privilege and opportunity, we give thanks for this country that we love and which we are called to serve. We give thanks for those who have gone before us, who have sacrificed sometimes their very lives that we might enjoy the blessings and freedoms of this great nation. Almighty God, Father of all mankind and Judge over nations, we ask you to bless this memorial service and to look down with favor and understanding upon the hearts of those who are gathered here to pay their tribute to those who have made the supreme sacrifice and for the benefit of all free men everywhere. Amen.
Amen.
Covered.
Right now, I would like to ask everyone to be seated except our veterans. The Cambria Chorus will perform God Bless America, and at this point, the youths of the community will walk around and give each veteran a flag and a poppy. This is honoring those who have gone before us and remind us that we should never miss an opportunity to thank a veteran who is still among us. it's kind of windy. As we close the service, I want to thank everybody here. Bruce Gibson is here, and especially I want to thank all my fellow veterans. We are going to have a barbecue. It will be a $5 donation. It'll be up in the far corner over in the parking lot here. Those who are able, could you pick up your chairs and carry them over to the tables over at the far end of the parking lot? I've been told that the bar is open from noon to 2 this afternoon. For those of you who want to have a beer with your hamburger and hot dog. And I also request that if you do drink the beer that you keep it inside the clubhouse.
Is she able to buy like 6 of the
Thank you,
copies?
everybody. Thank you very
How
much.
much do you know?
Did he tell you what he told me?
Here's our gentleman doing the barbecue over here. Boy Scout. Hi guys. Doing a live video so everyone can see who's doing all the hard work.
Dude, you're gonna have a hard time selling that red stuff.
The red?
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.